Why highly intelligent people often do these 7 things alone. There's a man I know. Call him Lawrence, 67. Retired classics professor in Hartford. He sits alone most evenings with a cup of black coffee in his hand. Some of you would call that admirable, the disciplined solitude highly intelligent men slip into after 50. His ex-wife called it the reason she left. His older son hasn't called in 11 months. Before I tell you the 7 things Lawrence does alone, I have to name the bill he's been paying for 40 years. Most psychology videos about intelligent men leave that part out. This one won't. I met Lawrence at a coffee shop in the fall. We sat for 2 hours. His phone stayed face down on the table the entire time. I asked him later why. He said, "When the phone goes face up, I'm working for it. When it goes face down, it's working for me." That single line explained everything I wanted to know about how a certain kind of mind survives late life intact. Some details have been changed for privacy. Lawrence is drawn from patterns I've observed across many men I've known. Lawrence taught Latin and Greek for 38 years. He reads Marcus Aurelius most mornings. He'd be the first to push back on the idea that he's intelligent in some rare way. What he is disciplined. And the 7 things he does alone are not signs of intelligence. They are practices. There's a difference, and that difference is what this whole video is about. The first practice. Most people sprint toward answers because answers feel like relief. The pressure stops. You can finally say, "I know what this is." Lawrence doesn't do that. Not because he's slow. Because he doesn't trust an answer that arrives that fast. He'll sit with a question for days. Not should I help my son this month, but what does helping him actually do to him at 34? Not was I right about leaving that job, but why did needing to be right matter so much to me at 56? That is what highly intelligent men actually do alone, and almost nobody recognizes it as intelligence. Seneca wrote about this 2,000 years ago in his 7th letter to Lucilius. He said something simple. "I never bring back home the same character that I took abroad with me." The crowd cheapens the question. The hurry erodes the man. Withdraw. Refine. Only then answer. That isn't intellectual cowardice. That's a mind that refuses cheap closure. The real conversation usually begins after everyone else has stopped talking. The second practice. Lawrence has never owned a beach house. He won't. The classics professor pension doesn't stretch that way. But he doesn't need one. Because Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor whose meditations Lawrence reads almost daily, wrote something that became Lawrence's quiet anchor. In Book 4, Marcus said it plain. "Men seek their retreats in country places and beaches and mountains, but a man may any hour he pleases retire into himself, and nowhere will he find a place of more quiet than in his own soul." That isn't escapism. It's the opposite of escapism. The cabin in the woods most men fantasize about is already inside them. It always was. The country place is portable. It's free. It's available between 2 emails, in the middle of an argument. During a meeting that's gone sideways, what looks like a man drifting off in conversation is sometimes just a man stepping into his country place for 30 seconds and coming back better than he left. Not as exit, as recovery, and only briefly enough that the people you love don't feel left. When Lawrence reads that passage at his kitchen table, he doesn't read it as philosophy. He reads it as a set of daily instructions. Which brings me to the third practice. Anger arrives, anxiety arrives, the cold pull of disappointment arrives. Most men either ride those waves or shove them under. Lawrence does neither. He treats the feeling like evidence, not an enemy, not a verdict, just data trying to tell him something. Brain research backs this up. A 2006 study by Heather Urey and her colleagues at the University of Wisconsin scanned the brains of adults in their early 60s while they regulated negative emotion. What they found was striking. The prefrontal cortex and the amygdala were inversely coupled in the older adults, meaning the thinking part of the brain was quietly down, regulating the reactive part, not deliberately, just as a function of years of lived practice. That's the brain at 60 doing something the brain at 25 usually can't. Try this. Right now. Notice where your shoulders are. Drop them an inch. Breathe in through your nose, and let the exhale last a beat longer than the inhale. That's your prefrontal cortex saying to your amygdala, "I've got this from here." You just did, in 7 seconds, what Lawrence has been doing for 40 years. The fourth practice is short and might be the most underrated. Lawrence rarely answers anything in the first 3 seconds. Not because he can't. Because the first response is almost always the cheapest one. It's the response your old wounds wrote for you. The response your ego rehearsed without asking. The response you'd be embarrassed by in 12 hours. A man who can hold 3 seconds of silence before answering has built a small Stoic muscle almost nobody around him has built. He uses it dozens of times a day, quietly. If you've made it this far, you're not here for entertainment. You're here because some part of you recognizes the shape of the man we're describing, and you've spent a long time being misread by everyone who didn't. These videos are made for that man. Wise men in the second half of their lives who've earned the right to think this deeply. Subscribe, there's a new one every week. Now the next 3 practices are the ones most people don't talk about, because they're the ones that cost something. The 5th practice. This is the one people misread the most. Lawrence stopped going to faculty reunions about 6 years ago. He doesn't take calls during dinner. Social media disappeared from his life over a decade ago. From the outside, it looks like he's retreating from the world. He isn't. He's pruning. There's a Stanford psychologist named Laura Carstensen who's spent decades studying this. Her research shows that as people cross into their 50s and 60s, and the pattern is especially strong in men, they don't become antisocial. They become selective. They quietly drop the peripheral relationships and concentrate their limited energy on the 3 or 4 that actually feed them. That's not avoidance. That's an adaptive strategy. The science calls it socio-emotional selectivity. Lawrence just calls it Tuesday. I met another man recently, let's call him Jeffrey, hospital administrator, 58. Took early retirement after a health scare. Found Marcus Aurelius in a used bookstore 3 years ago, and felt like the book had been waiting for him. His wife teases him sometimes. She caught him doing his evening review last spring and asked if he was becoming weird. He told me he laughed and said, "Yeah, sometimes I am." And then he kept doing it. That's what this practice looks like in a marriage that works. Becoming weird, with permission. Pruning, with humor. The 6th practice. And here is where I want to be honest with you about something. Lawrence rewrites the meaning of his own past, not the facts. The meaning. The argument with his father in 1979 that he thought was about money at 67, he understands it was about fear of being replaced. The mentor who pulled away in 1992 that he read as betrayal, he now sees as a man who couldn't handle being outgrown. That's not denial. It's narrative honesty, the discipline of seeing an old room with new eyes. But here's the part that hurts. Sometimes when you rewrite meaning, you have to admit you misread someone for 20 years. Lawrence's ex-wife, the one who left almost a decade ago, he used to think she gave up. He doesn't think that anymore. He thinks she stayed years longer than she should have, with a man who lived mostly inside his own mind. That admission cost him something to say out loud the first time. Most cost acknowledgments do. If revisiting old relationships brings up pain that doesn't lift on its own, please reach out to someone trained to help you sit with it. Nothing in this video is a substitute for that. The 7th and last practice. The one that pulls all the others together. Lawrence's Solitude has a return address. It always sends him back. Back to his 2 friends. Back to his daughter's monthly phone call. The graduate student he still mentors for free. There's a line from Seneca, in his 8th letter, that I think about a lot. His young correspondent asked him whether he was being told to shun the crowd, withdraw from people, and be content with his own conscience. Seneca answered, "My object in shutting myself up and locking the door is to be able to help a greater number. Withdrawal that sends you back to the world is one thing. Withdrawal that hides you from the world is something else entirely." Lawrence's Solitude is the first kind. He's clear about that. And here is what the era doesn't understand. The world told you that a man who chooses long stretches alone must be lonely, or arrogant, or broken. They were wrong. The era forgot how to read this discipline. That is not a debt you owe. That is not a flaw you need to apologize for. Most men your age have stopped confusing the two, the kind of alone that hurts, and the kind that makes you whole. The world hasn't yet. 3 tools, all Stoic, all work in under 5 minutes a day. Tool 1, morning preparation. When you wake up, before the phone, sit with one question for 60 seconds. Ask yourself, what is the one thing today most likely to disturb me? And what is the smallest version of myself that would react to it? That's Marcus Aurelius's morning practice, adapted. The philosopher Pierre Hadot called these spiritual exercises, and the word exercise matters. They're not insights. They're reps. Tool 2, evening review. Before sleep, 3 minutes. Walk back through the day. Name one moment your old self showed up. Name one moment your better self did. Don't analyze. Just name. That's Seneca's evening review. From his book On Anger, he describes lying in bed at night and asking himself what he improved, what he resisted, where he failed. Tool 3. Premortem. Once a week, take a decision you're carrying and imagine, in detail, that it failed. Not as anxiety, as preparation. Marcus did this constantly. Pick one, just one. Try it for a week. Don't try all three at once. That's how Stoic discipline turns into Stoic theater. Look for most of your life. You've been told there's something a little off about how your mind works. Too quiet, too much in your own head, too slow to react, too unwilling to perform. There isn't. The silence is not arrogance. It's discipline. The depth is not a flaw. It's a country place inside you that the noise of the world cannot enter without your permission. You're not the problem. You're the proof that there's still room in this world for men who think this deeply and pay the bill for it without complaining too loudly. In the comments tonight, tell me one thing. Which of these 7 practices has cost you the most, and which one has saved you the most? Just the 2 numbers. I read every single one, and honestly, those answers are where I keep learning. Subscribe if you want more letters like this. Until next time. On the screen now, 2 videos. One on the 7 signs your pain quietly changed how you think the older brother to this one. The other on the 5 things deep thinkers never explain. Pick whichever speaks to you tonight.